Welcome to the Theo Therapist Podcast, where theologically trained licensed therapists share health and healing conversations. Join our host, Dr. Trice for conversations about real-life issues from both theological and therapeutic perspectives.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Theo Therapist Podcast. My name is Dr. Trice. I am the host of the Theo Therapist Podcast, and I'm so glad that you are with us today. Today I have the wonderful opportunity of having an awesome guest with me. His name is Brother Brady Radford. He goes by Brother, but he is a Reverend Radford. He's a licensed professional counselor and a certified counselor supervisor. There's so many connection points between myself and Reverend Brady. The primary thing that we both have in common is that we're both licensed professional counselors. We both are in ministry. He is a minister of word and sacrament for the Presbyterian Church USA. He is a native of Arkansas, where I'm a native of South Carolina. But we both have MDivs. We both have MSs. His MDiv is from the Interdenominational Theological Center that are known as ITC. Where he has an MDiv in Psychology of Religion and Pastoral Care, and he has a Master's in Rehabilitation Counseling from Georgia State University. And so he has been preaching and teaching and helping others for over 2 decades now. I know that he serves in a church environment. He also has his own private practice. In addition to that, his specialty is helping particularly leaders and church leaders with their families and relationships. And so I'm super excited today that we get an opportunity to have this dialogue and have this conversation. The title of today's podcast is Healing Your Relationship. I imagine there are lots of people who are in serious relationships or marriages who have a space of healing that might be necessary in their relationship. So I'm really happy to have an opportunity to open this conversation up today. Welcome, Brother Brady. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you, Dr. Trice. It's a blessing. I hope it's okay to call you Dr. Trice, Dr. Glenn, whichever.
All the names work. All the names work.
Yeah, it's a blessing to be with you. I am grateful for the work that I get to do in terms of, in my practice, the Love Well Collective. I help people get married and stay married if that's their interest. And I help clergy leaders deal with the demands of ministry, many of which suffer in silence, exist on islands as pastoral leaders in congregations that, need care, but oftentimes don't have a framework for acknowledging how the leaders need care as well. So I'm not necessarily a pastor of pastors, but I'm a person who provides space for pastors to consider what they need and to have an opportunity to get those needs met in a private, confidential container. So I look forward to this conversation as we talk about healing relationships.
Brady, I was so looking forward to this conversation for us to have today because I think it connects with so many people. I know like you do that, we work with couples a lot. I work with individuals and couples, and I've had, an opportunity almost over the last 20 years to work with a lot of couples who get to spaces where they struggle to navigate something, some incident, some distrust, some betrayal that happened in a relationship, and they come in a space looking for healing. And so I'm glad that we get a chance to kind of dialogue about what that looks like from our perspectives and what hope we might be able to offer, or at least some guiding direction for someone that might be struggling with that. One of the things that I'd like to share with our audience is that for each of these podcasts, we have a guiding question, somewhat a framework to understand what it is we're doing and why we're doing it in this particular podcast. And the guiding question for this podcast is, what are some ways to approach healing in your relationship? Particularly when it's a committed relationship, like a serious relationship that might be headed toward marriage and a marriage. What are some ways that we can approach healing? But before we dive into that, I always ask my guest, how did you get into this theotherapy intersection? This is such a unique crossroad of being a therapist and also having theological training. We are a little bit of the unicorns in the mental health field. What started you on this path, Brady?
I'm going to take a theological bent here and just say it was God's love. I think love is the most underrated resource that we have available to us today, and love is so much more than just a sentimental feeling. Love is really a infinite renewable resource that is gifted to us. So when I think about being called into ministry in a time and space in my life where the church that I was a part of, the focus was really about serving people, and yet I watched a life of service that also needed some boundaries to care for self and care for family. And as I served alongside a leader who showed me what it was like to love God's people, uh, it also gave me a chance to acknowledge the struggle that sometimes can be present for ministers when it comes to loving the people that God has first stewarded to us by way of family, marital partner, parent, child relationships. And I say that with all appreciation, no judgment, honestly. It's just acknowledging how complex relationships really are. So even when we talk about healing relationships, I think that healing first begins with us having a equal understanding of what does it really mean to experience brokenness in our relationships. And for me, brokenness is not something to be, well, not, I won't say brokenness. I'll say the struggles of being in a relationship is not something to be avoided or to be shame of. It's just whenever you have two people who are endeavoring to blend their lives together, there will be moments of discord. The question is not, do we have moments of discord, but how do we manage those moments of discord? So the thought of healing being just part of the natural growth process that comes with us deciding to do life together. I might also add that maybe that begins for me as someone who entered the world as part of a twin pair. So I've got an identical twin brother. He's my baby brother by 10 minutes, and I make sure he doesn't forget that. Um, but literally, it meant from day one acknowledging what it's like to share space with someone else, to be in this constant place of negotiating your needs and my needs. So I think that's part of the setup that God has just sort of gave me from day one to have that opportunity.
Right. So God kind of already set the pathway for you before you, long before a call to ministry was accepted or before you started serving others. You were already on that journey of what does it mean to be in relationship long term and find ways to constantly make it healthier,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Because the opportunity for dis-ease or ill health, opportunity for struggle and strife, means endless opportunities for that. But I don't know, maybe I was 13, 14 when I figured out, wait, if we both keep fighting for what we want, I mean, we could fight forever. There's got to be a middle ground here some way, somehow. And so for the first 23 years of my life, before my brother got married, it just sort of felt like that partnership was what set me up to be so imaginative about how people do love well, to how people learn to love well in my work today. So to come back to that question, I think the beginning of healing relationships starts with understanding that having points of struggle and tension is not a problem. Is how we begin to understand that the struggle and tension, how we
It's going to happen.
yeah, it's a natural part of the growth process of this union, and that if we don't manage our opportunities to grow, then on day 100 we'll be trying to recreate the same relationship that we had on day one, and that's not progress, if you ask me.
So often when I get a chance to talk to couples, I try to remind them that conflict is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
Having difference is not bad inherently. What becomes the challenge is how you react to it, how you handle it, how you navigate through it. Oftentimes, whenever couples talk to me and they ask, okay, so, all right, we can acknowledge that there's brokenness here, or there's hurt here, there's harm that's happened here, but what do we do about it? The first thing I always say is making sure that everybody's acknowledged. what happened, right? Can you both honestly acknowledge that there's a need to heal something? That's usually the biggest step, because if one partner, sees a need to heal or help, and the other one has no remorse for the fact that, there's a need at all, that's going to hinder what that journey looks like. But I do think acknowledging it, plays a big role in starting any journey toward healing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think acknowledging it, inside of acknowledging it, is acknowledging just how complicated the difficulty or the pain may be. And usually the first thing that means for me is trying to help couples realize that our pains and our concerns don't have to be in competition with one another. Usually the block to progress or healing begins with, wait, X, Y, or Z happened to me. Yeah, but A, B, or C happened to me. And somehow in our competing for airtime in the relationship, it's as if we're saying that our relationship is not a big enough container to hold both of our concerns and interests. And so in my work, I want to convince the couple, A, challenges are going to happen. B, the healthiest way of responding is believing there's enough space for both of our concerns to exist on the table. Sometimes what that means is being able to maybe hold our horses for a second while we figure out, where do we put our attention first? I mean, we can only care for one wound at a time. And if we can help partner A breathe deeply and be attentive to what's happening with partner B, then we can heal that wound and come back and heal come back and pay attention to the other wound as well. But that means exiting the cycle of blame. It means exiting the cycle of competition, to say, well, who hurt who first, and who's more wrong in the scenario.
Right. Resisting the urge to try to, figure out who has to go first.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
It's also about comparisons. I like to say that, comparison is the thief of joy. Or maybe you've heard it said, I don't know who said it, it's not my original statement, but in that comparison,
it's Eleanor Roosevelt. I actually quoted it last podcast.
Awesome. See, let's build a bridge between the two. When we're in that comparing phase, it's hard to be in the listening phase. And I'll say this, by and large, this is probably the thought I would bring to this. Marriage was created to be a healing ground, but often we accept it as a battleground. And
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we didn't learn what it meant to be in healthy relationships usually before we got to marriage. And so now we're test driving, we're learning what this healthy journey looks like. And it comes with some trials and errors.
Yeah, which could be great if we have made an agreement for our relationship to be a safe container for us to experiment and doing some new things and trying to reach each other in a way that feels loving and that communicates love. But if experimentation is met by a certain level of expectation that's often unannounced, that's another challenge that we should talk about for dating, for seriously dating and married relationships. Oftentimes we bring into marriage our own playbook. That playbook is inherent with its own expectations. And sometimes we never truly announce to our partner what those expectations are. And if we do announce it, we announce it after they've already missed the mark. And so in one way, it's like we're not setting each other up for success here.
I do premarital counseling, like I'm pretty sure you do as well, right? And in the years of premarital counseling, I often start off right after we talk about what commitment means. We go straight into what are expectations and what does it mean to have an attitude based on an expectation that you haven't verbalized, that you both haven't mutually agreed upon, but that you're holding this other person to, and then having sometimes aught with them, having issue with them because they don't meet this expectation that you never verbalized or communicated in any way, and then you're upset that they didn't meet that expectation. And that's going to lead to disappointment and frustration, and lots of spaces that don't get addressed until they become an issue.
Yeah, and maybe the best way to say it for the listeners is, there's a part of this that begins with you. And one of the healthiest things you can do for your relationship is become more curious about how you reach some of the conclusions and some of the assumptions that you bring into this relationship, or some of the assumptions and conclusions that you may have about your partner. We often say, man, I know him, or I know her, or I know them. But there's no way you could know all of your partner while your partner is still discovering parts of themselves. So being open to the learning that is an inherent part of the love equation, being open to that learning means sometimes I'm taking things personally that have nothing to do with me. That is part of my partner's journey, and I may be somewhat clued in on that, and there may still be parts of it that I have no idea about. But if I come in and I'm strong and I'm wrong, then that creates quite a difficulty for the relationship.
Right. And with that openness, also active curiosity that, this person is still learning themselves. And so you can also continue to learn them as they're growing as well. Not assuming you know them just because you met them 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that I absolutely know them. They're evolving.
Yeah.
They're becoming more of who they are as they mature and as they grow in different ways.
Yeah.
And so having an open curiosity, I think, bridges some of those spaces of frustration.
Being open and curious about them and being willing to let them be curious about you. And that's one of the pieces around sort of transparency and vulnerability that intimacy is created by that level of inner awareness, and being open to being loved means sort of being open to being known in ways where you don't keep all the walls up. And that can be scary for some of us in terms of letting others in. Part of how we establish expectations in our relationships is that we have a picture perfect scenario that we're trying to work out. Oftentimes, if our partner will do what we want them to do, our picture is complete. And yet,
This thing will work out
yeah,
if they would just get in
we
line.
did not get the script. And so our relationship becomes this endless back and forth. And really, the back and forth becomes our script. It becomes our script that I'm trying to convince you to play your role in my fantasy of love, and you're trying to convince me to play my role in your fantasy of love. And neither one of us are really sharing the script in completion. I mean, it's just sort of, and I don't want to be too ethereal and just abstract. Let's talk about what that looks like then in real time. I think in real time, that looks like acknowledging that if we're not making time for our relationship, if we're not making time to listen to one another intently, to be curious with one another, curiosity and judgment, two sides of the same coin. That I think I know you, so I'm judging that when you did this, what you really meant is X, Y. Maybe, but maybe not. So that being curious thing, making time to pour into one another, to really listen, to check in. One of the check-ins that I use with couples often, maybe listeners can just pick this one up. This is sort of based off Rogerian theory. It's just a 4-prompt sequence. I am, my partner is, our marriage, our relationship is, therefore I must. And what's the imperative action that I feel like I need to commit to in terms of showing up for our relationship today? And how am I connecting what I must do to the way I'm interpreting where I am, where my partner is, and what I'm believing to be true about our relationship? So I am, my partner is, our marriage, our relationship is, therefore I must. So if I feel like we in distress and my partner's like, I'm cool over here, then having two different sets of expectation are gonna make it really hard to have peace in the relationship.
And one of the things in recent time, I've seen some couples do is actually have the intentional space to say, hey, I need a safe space to process some things with you. I need to sit down and I need us to look eye to eye, soul to soul, and be able to kind of connect on this thing. Oftentimes, many of the ways in which couples have kind of shorthanded having conversations are in passing or in the car or in the bed or, just places where they're not being very intentional about resolution or finding connection. They're just kind of like, I'm just going to put some words out here and you put some words out here and we see what happens. Versus, one of the things I'm often telling couples is there's certain things that need to feel sacred in your relationship. And those sacred spaces need to be spaces of connection. You need to be intentional to sit down because I need to look in your soul. You need to look in mine so that you can hear me and I can hear you, not listen, but just hear what actually is coming through for you. Because we can't get to a space of healing if we, one, we don't trust each other, to be honest, but two, we can't really bear one another, right? We can't bear each other's soul. We can't bear each other's spirit and what's happening with each other. And so I think a lot of what you're saying, Brady, connects with, that notion I have of I need to be able to sit across from you, be able to be open, be able to be curious, allow myself to be vulnerable, and then us try to bridge to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what if I have never done that with anyone in my entire life? What if that's the case and I have no way of really communicating to my partner how scary that is? Because I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid that this other storyline is going to be created about me. It is exactly the thing that is needed for any relationship to be healthy and whole, and yet it is exactly the thing that can feel most threatening for one or both partners if it's not a skill set that they've encountered before. And that's why I say I think that the relationship. When I say that many of us turn relationships into a battleground and it was meant to be a healing ground, let me clarify. I'm not saying that your partner is the source of your healing. That is not the case. I think your partner has the chance to be the first witness, to bear witness to the healing that God, your community, and they have an opportunity to help support. But it's your healing. I mean, they are a resource to become a cheerleader, to mirror back what they're seeing. But it ain't no fit. My heart was broken until I found the other half of my heart, and then our hearts came together. And that's
I was a
there.
person and I am a person.
Yeah, yeah. That's a storybook. Say that for the big screen, but that ain't how it works in real life.
That belongs to Disney.
Yeah, yeah. The real story
and Hallmark.
that I'm hoping that you and I can create a container that's big enough for our brokenness, but also has space enough for our dreams to be articulated and worked towards. Because when two people get together, we're going to create something by intention or happenstance. If we look around and what we've created is not what we want, then right now we could decide to do something different. But we got to trust each other. We got to trust, and we got to be willing to do the work that it takes to own the places where we need to be praying for and asking for assistance to help heal the part of our story that's still in formation. That's, yeah.
I mean, and I think, we've kind of talked about acknowledging and we've talked about being open and creating curiosity spaces and safe spaces. I think we've even talked about how intentional you need to be, right? When trying to sit down and work through your own growth and areas of challenge, and then sitting with your partner and allowing you both to have space to kind of talk and reconnect over that. The question becomes, once we've done that and we feel like we've gotten to a better place, how do we hold it? How do we keep it? How do we maintain it? What is this tending to? Like, how do we tend to this very, fragile sometimes state of newness that we're holding? Because it's kind of like a little fledgling, duck. It's like, it feels good, but I don't know. I'm a little afraid of my world right now.
Yeah. I've got a great friend by the name of Arthur Waller who oftentimes talks about, if you want to figure out how to help people get on the same accord, you got to show them a problem or a cause that's bigger than the both of them. And so to that end, I would say we have to have a vision for our marriage. We have to have a goal for the love that we hope to enjoy and create. So with every instance in our relationship, we're either planting good seed or just scattering seed across the ground. Earlier, you were talking about that, and I thought about the biblical passage that talks about all the different types of soil and the seeds, and the shallow roots and quick roots. But honestly, you can. How could you hope to enjoy fruit in a relationship that's not corresponding to seeds that you're willing to plant in that relationship? So you plant good seed, you eat good fruit. If you plant shallow seeds, you eat no fruit. I mean, if it's just for show, and I'll be honest, I'm gonna go on a tangent here. I think that there is a dynamic that we're faced with in popular public opinion, that the goal becomes sort of proving I don't need to be with someone else, like I can get it on my own. That you got shows about figures who become social influencers, and the intent is that I can make it on my own. But we were not created to just make it on our own. And yeah, so the the fact of needing uh, needing a mate, or deciding to have a mate and co-create something that's never existed in the world before, that's an awesome opportunity. And I think in answer to that question, tending it is that we're nurturing something new. We're nurturing a vision that takes into account we didn't show up perfectly, and we might not be perfect when it's our time to go home, considering if this love lasts until then, but our connection makes us better people in the world versus it tears us down. Because, I mean, if anybody knows your secrets, your partner, if anybody knows how to press the buttons, your partner. And so even that, knowing that and being vulnerable with one another, there are some places where nobody could hurt me like my partner, and discovering that the opportunity is there, and they choose over and over again not to use my worst days against me, and not to put me so high on the pedestal that they expect my best days to be my everyday. There's a realistic understanding of who I am, and they accept all of me, not just the parts they prefer.
Because they are the only person that gets to bear witness to kind of the fullness of who you are, because they get to see it more so than anybody
Yeah,
else. They
yeah,
see your adult self more than even your parents did. So they know you in a way, and get a chance to see your day-to-day interactions in a way no one else does. And so that makes it sacred
hmm
in a lot of
hmm
ways, because they do get to see a part of you that nobody else got to see. But it also makes them sometimes feel even more vulnerable, because you get to see the parts that nobody
yeah,
else gets to see.
yeah. So yeah, to that end, I would just um, name how much love requires a sacred trust. I mean, it's having every opportunity um, to use what you have against a person, but knowing that a love has grown and developed to such degree that we don't cut each other we don't cut each other off at the knees, because we need each other to stand up. I need you to stand up for me on the days when I can't stand up, and you'll need me to do vice versa. So um, that intention of what we are creating being bigger than either one of us on our own. And I'll say this. I hadn't put it in a book yet, so I'm hoping this will be the first record of it. But when you get married, you create a culture that's never existed in this world before. And if you have any appreciation for what goes into creating culture, hey, that ought to make us more patient. It ought to make us more intentional about the work of building family, building ritual, building custom, building intentional ways of being with each other. Because the people who come behind us, they only gonna see what we show them. They only gonna know to expect what we exemplify before them. So it's an awesome opportunity and responsibility. So it shouldn't be entered into lightly, I would say. It shouldn't be entered into for your own personal motivations, because it's work.
and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's different types of work at different phases
Mm-hmm.
in the relationship, and so that's something that I think more people are becoming more aware of. But it's still a journey.
Yeah.
Not to belabor the journey word, I want to add a
Can
different
I say something real
spin.
quick? Real quick.
Oh, sure,
Real
go
quick
ahead.
to that piece, that's a lot of work. So this might be one way of helping couples think about love and where you are in your love story. That typically there's a dream state in our meeting. That dream sometimes gives way to what feels like a disaster. It's like, man, I'm not sure this is the person that I thought, right? And so it feels like the dream has sort of dashed to the ground and there's disaster or drama before us. But if we can hold on through the disaster or drama state, we begin to understand that, wait, I'm really just seeing all of who this person is. And if that doesn't drive me away, the dream, the drama can give way to discovery. That way, I'm learning that it's okay for us not to be the same on everything. I'm learning that, oh, that's his part of his story, that's their part of their story, and I got the background that helps me understand what they're doing a little bit more. And that dream and drama and discovery can eventually give way to the kind of relationship that we desire. That's deliberate, that's built with the best of our intentions. That's not just what we hope for, but it's what we worked for. So dream, drama, discovery, and a deliberate relationship that we both desire to have.
And I think those are the things that will hold you in a space that doesn't feel like you're just in a relationship,
Yeah.
but that you're thriving in a relationship,
Yeah.
right? If you can be open to those shifting stages, then, you embrace what's coming. We're in this stage now, we're in this stage now, and it feels different. I want to ask something because we have another unique intersection point. I think we both work with high profile clients to a degree. We both work with clergy. We work with people in leadership positions and what it means for them to have relationship in the public eye. That sometimes creates an additional barrier and boundary, especially if you're in one of those healing phases, and what it means to tend to it in the public sphere. Are there any thoughts that you have or kind of you share with your couples when they are front facing to lots of people who want to have some input about what their relationship should and should not look like and how it should function?
Um, I try to, I try to, I try to bring bring it down to earth in the sense of, I try to hit them with the same stuff I hit the regular people with. I try to encourage them to be in the room as their non-public facing persona. Because inside of them, just like inside of every one of my other clients, there's a little boy and a little girl who needs something, a little person who needs something. And part of the work we're doing is to try to meet the needs of that younger person and that agent adult self. That choosing one over the other means its own level of imbalance and difficulty. And I don't know, my high client profile list may not be as long as yours, so I'm getting there. So
Hey, to whom much is given. But I will say one of the other things that I just kind of add to that, and I do think it's important to talk to the actual people, right? We don't buy your hype and your persona here. That's not what we're here for. We're here to talk to you, talk to your soul, talk to you and your relationship. But I do want to acknowledge how protective couples need to be of the sanctity and the sacredness of their space.
yeah,
In a lot of spaces, they end up being each other's kind of protection in the environment in the world because people want to down their partner for one reason or another, or people just want to be intrusive. They want to kind of get in and, so do they leave their socks on the floor just like my husband leaves socks on the floor? They want to get into spaces that should be sacred and that couples have to turn to each other even more so. I think in those spaces so that they're not getting outside influences that can create and amplify things that are just a normal phase of a relationship.
yeah. Having boundaries around the sacred relationship that exists between the two of you is important. It's amazingly important because as you said, no one else sees what your partner sees. And saying to your partner, but that's not how other people see me, that ain't helpful. I mean, the other people don't see the whole story. I see the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And I'll just say, when there is that kind of sacred trust in place, it is amazing what a love can outstand and endure. That literally, Luther Vandross said it best. I believe in the power of love, and to really, I would say, to really take God up on God's offer to show us what love truly is. I think we have to imagine that even in some of our worst days, that there is a flicker of a candle that still keeps that love burning through some of the most difficult circumstances. And those difficult circumstances don't signal failure. They don't signal that we're not doing it right. It signals that we're on a journey. And if we if we can stay in the game, if we can stay in the fight, then what's on the other side of this phase of the journey stands to be just as joyous as any part of the phases that we've experienced before. Yeah.
Well, and on that note, I think we have had an awesome conversation discussing the healing journey in relationships and what it takes. We've talked about some approaches that each of us, use or encourage our couples to use when we are working with them, but then also just what are some key foundational pieces to what healing might look like in a relationship.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, brother, for being here today. Please tell the people how they can find you to follow up and get more great nuggets from you.
Sure thing. On social media, my social media is just simply at Brother Brady or at Lovewell ATL. Again, that's at Brother Brady or at Lovewell ATL. LovewellATL.com is where you can also find or connect to my services. I'm just excited to be a resource for helpers and healers who are often resources for so many other people. In addition to having spent 2 decades serving the church and as an ordained leader, it's been important for me to see the next phase of my call, which really involves supporting pastors from a parachurch position. So I currently work with pastors individually in my private practice, but also work with pastors and congregations as a consultant during times of transition, in the midst of difficult staff interactions or crises in the community with members or just the community at large. And for me, that's about realizing that ministry needs to happen in the church and in the community in more ways beyond just preaching. And I don't mean to diminish preaching when I say just preaching, but every minister ain't called to be a preacher or a pastor. And there are many different ways to serve God's people and to do it effectively. And we need more people broadening the scope of what ministry looks like today, rather than putting churches on every corner. So I'd rather, so in this case, I have a chance to work with pastors around the globe, literally, in being that kind of support personnel to help them be well as they help others find the healing presence of God's love. So,
Amen to that. That's needed. And I wish we had 10 more of you, Brady. So thank you. So thank you so much for being a part of the Theo Therapist Podcast today. As always, we do not provide advice, and what we say does not become a substitute for you seeking out professional help.
Amen.
So I encourage you to find a therapist today, find a pastoral counselor, a Theo Therapist of sorts, and take care of yourself and be well.
Theo Therapist Podcast, real talk at the intersection of theology and therapy. Check out Dr. Glenn's new journal series titled Brain Dump Journals for the Busy, available on Amazon. Visit our websites for more information at thetheotherapist.com or catriceglenn.com.